Yeah. I think Vimo, maybe we can start.
Yes. Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I'll hand over to Balaji for introduction and the initial slides.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Vimal. Good evening, all. Welcome to our webinar on unlocking the power of low code, no code. In today's digital world, businesses are constantly looking for different ways to streamline their operation and improve efficiency. So I'm also keen to understand during this session how the low code, no code is going to help the business analysis community. So let's move on to the next slide. Acknowledgement of country. IIBA Australia acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present with us today. Thank you. And a brief about our upcoming events and what IIBA Sydney branch does in the future. So before we get into the webinar, on 4th April 2023, we have an in-person low code, no code, BA skills and unmatched pairing session. And on 27th April 2023, we'll have a session on what do recruiters look for. So interested can join through the event list mentioned below. And the next exciting news is the Festival of Business Analysis, FOBA. I'm eagerly waiting, fingers crossed. 16th to 20th of October 23. It's going to happen across Australia and New Zealand. So last year it was a fantastic success, and I hope it's going to continue this year as well. And eagerly waiting for everyone to come and collaborate. Next is on the study groups. IIBA Sydney conducts multiple study groups. So it can be joined virtually. So the QR codes are present below. If anyone is interested, they can join using the QR code below. I'll wait for a couple of seconds before I move. If anyone is interested, they can take a screenshot of this. Okay. Again, the QR codes for the mentoring programs. And finally, the IIBA Awards program. So there are multiple awards that is going to come up in this year. So Business Analysis Practice of the Year, Business Analysis Innovation of the Year, Dr. Cicely McDougall, Business Analyst of the Year, Emerging Business Analyst of the Year, Business Analysis Leader of the Year. And the submission will close on 17th July. So interested, please register through the link below.
Yeah, just to add a few more on this, that the award program has started last year in IIBA, and it's a huge success. And we are looking forward for all the enthusiastic business analysts to share their experience and submit their entries, which will be later on evaluated and shared for the awards. Any other information, you can use the following link, IIBA's 2023 award program.
Thanks, Vima. And finally, the call for volunteers. So we require more volunteers to support the IIBA Sydney branch. So interested BAs can register through the link provided below. And now I hand over to Vimal.
Thanks, Balaji, for sharing the community update, IIBA Sydney updates. Without taking more time, I would hand over the call to Pete, who is here for sharing us the useful information on low code, no code. Welcome, Pete and Andre.
Thanks, Vimal.
Yours. You can start.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll quickly just give some context to today's session. So this session's been a long time coming for me, and I'm super excited about having it. The backstory is I've spent the last 2 or 3 years in the low code, no code Microsoft Power Platform space and pioneering the adoption for a lot of major organizations. And what I saw in that process is the people that have emerged as the champions of this technology and been able to add it to their toolkit most successfully and add value to the business is the business analysts. And the reason I saw it quickly was I had a business before this called PM Partners. You may or may not have heard them. And so I had a long-standing relationship with the IIBA and BAs. And as soon as I saw low code, no code Power Platform, it was a no-brainer because this platform is built on Excel logic. And as we all know, BA spent a lot of time in Excel spreadsheets and all of that stuff. And Pete will share with you different ways of how you can unlock the technology to improve your career, adding additional value to the business, and create a new kind of business analyst, in my view. So I'm super excited about this. And Nathan joins us from Microsoft. Nathan is the wizard of pro code, low code. Nathan Backers, and he's the tech lead for the Power Platform. So Pete will share with you his story of his journey as a business analyst and what it's done for him in his career. And Nathan will be able to razzle dazzle you with the technology. So it's going to be a little bit overwhelming, and I'm sure there'll be a follow-up conversations. We're here to help. We want to support the community and its growth, and we are working in a number of organizations, both big and small. So that's enough about me. I'm going to hand over to Pete now. Just thank you to Brianna and Vimal and the team for the opportunity to share this with the community. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Andre. Just before I kick in, I just want to make sure, can everyone see my screen? Awesome. Pretty cool. So to Andre's point, what we're really here to cover off is the unlocking of the power of low code and no code and why BAs hold the key to that. So we have a couple of slides to go through. First, I just want to do a little bit of context setting about no code, low code. I'll leave the rest of it to Nathan. And then I want to tell you my power story, my personal story, and how I got involved in this. So when we start thinking about what is it, a typical definition would say it's a method for software and for software application development for people like myself with little or no coding experience and knowledge, and it helps and that help you build apps by using drag and drop functionality and other visual guidance. Now, why is it so appealing to organizations and to people in general? It's basically because it enables rapid development and delivery of business value without having to go to your traditional IT delivery function within the organization. And the other part of it is, what can you do with it? Well, you can build the apps that the organization needs, whether it's a customer experience app, a line of business app, or any automation and efficiency apps that help you improve the way you work. Really, you can go do all of it with just a little bit of logic and experience. So when someone says to me, why did you go low code, no code? I say, look, it requires very little or no coding experience and knowledge to deliver value to the business rapidly by building the apps that they need. So from that perspective, then comes the question of why power? Well, Power Platform is the low-code, no-code platform that Microsoft uses to deliver these solutions and applications. So when someone says, why and how did you end up in this position? I say, I want to tell them my story to better explain it. We can talk about the continuous evolution of business analysis. We can talk about the fact that they are the bridge between technology and business, but ideally, personal experience speaks best, at least for me. So basically, I'm Pete. I love solving problems, processes, security, data, and design. I really don't like poor data quality and repetitive tasks. And these are things that I see on and on, regardless of the role organization that I work with, right? So I have about 15 years of experience in a varying number of roles, and my current role is a functional consultant. I've worked across telecommunications, ICT, healthcare, professional services, and education in domains such as modern work, security, app development, and cloud. And I'm sure that most of you on this call have either a similar journey or will go through a similar journey as you develop professionally in your career. So when someone says, basically, what drew you to it? Well, I say, let me tell you what my role is, right? I'm always the person that both technical and non-technical stakeholders come and talk to. Given time, I think like most of us, I intend to become a subject matter expert in the domain I support and operate in. Even though I start as a BA and I gather requirements, as I gather requirements and learn and understand the intricacies of the product or service or solution that I'm delivering or the need that I'm solving, I gain domain knowledge and expertise. I have a user mindset, so my focus is always on the end user. So user journeys, wireframes, prototypes are my thing, and I have an OCD complexion about them. I always think of how would that look if I went through it when thinking about solving the needs and providing a good experience. Last but not least, data analysis and reporting and report development are part of my day-to-day life. So when someone says, well, why I chose Power Platform, it's really easy. I was already there, but I didn't know it yet, right? Why is that? Well, that's because of my domain knowledge. I'm a business analyst. I work in binary forms to a certain extent. So process, workflows, rules, split decisioning, and everything else is part of my logic in the way I operate, even as a human being. And that's the way Power Platform also operates. Microsoft's ecosystem is something that I'm very familiar with, whether we're talking about PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Access, SharePoint, and things like that. We've all had some level of exposure to it, which makes it easy to then adopt Power. User mindset, so exceptional user experience when considering needs and requirements. I've talked about this and I'll talk about it over and over again, because what ultimately you end up doing is you end up developing and delivering applications for end users, and they're your basically key consumers. So your user experience needs to be front and center when you do things like this. And finally, data, right? I'm yet to find a role in which I don't rely on Excel or Access or any other data processing or data analytics tool in an organization. I still haven't in 15 years found a role in which I can say, ooh, we didn't use anything to report, measure, or analyze data sets. So then the question becomes, well, how do I use Power Platform? And usually that depends on the challenge that's at hand. Power Platform has multiple components that I think Nathan will talk to, but my journey usually starts with the data. Where is the data that I need to surface to my users, and what do my users need to do with that data? So if they need to see that data or input additional information and enrich that data, I go ahead and develop a Power App. I then use something called Power Automate to develop workflows and rules for execution of specific activities that I need to happen. On top of that, I've recently started using Power Virtual Agents as a way to help users understand or find the right answers, but also help them insert data if they need to without having to open the app. And last but not least, Power BI, which is what I use for analytics and visualizations and providing insights into the work that is relevant to the business. The really important thing to note here is this isn't just about applications. It's also about how I use it personally. For example, I've set up a Power Automate flow that every time when someone sends me a message and I'm in a meeting, lets them know that I'm in a meeting and I'll get back to them after my meeting ends. And it also sends me a reminder to get back to those people. So it's not just about delivering applications and value. It's also about how I make myself more free and more productive and spend less time on tasks that don't add as much value. So one of the things when I talked about this with my colleagues within Increment was they said, oh, that's really good, but what are really the benefits? Well, personal benefits, selfishly, increased value, right? You are more valuable as an individual to the organization, but also to yourself. You have a new tool in your tool set that you can use to solve business needs and problems. You have improved efficiency and productivity. You develop your problem-solving skills, and you upskill and you professionally develop. The benefit for the organization, because this is a relationship of mutual interest, organization gets faster innovation by allowing people like business analysts to develop low-code, no-code platforms. They have a growth in capabilities. It also allows collaboration. So we get to talk about the different ways in which we solve challenges. And ultimately, it improves the bottom line because they can rely on business analysts to solve some of the problems that they have without investing heavily into IT technical skilled resources. So as I mentioned, talking with the guys within the team, giving this a go, they said, okay, this is really good, but what I really want to understand is how do I actually get started? Well, the way to get started basically is by going to Microsoft Learn. It's a wonderful repository of documentation and how-tos. If you have any questions after you go to Microsoft Learn, ideally you get started by using it, referencing Microsoft Learn. If you have any questions or hit any speed bumps, you go to the Power Platform Forum. But ultimately, given enough time, you should aim to achieve a level of certification within Microsoft. The basic one is Power Platform Foundations, and it indicates a sufficient understanding of all those 4 or 5 components of the Power Platform. Ultimately, if you get started and if you hit a roadblock and you need a little bit of a roadside assist, I'm always here. I'm always happy to help and talk and share experiences and knowledge. So more or less, that's the ultimate view of a BA turned Power Platform functional consultant on this world. At this moment, I think I'll hand over to Nathan, and Nathan is going to cover the platform in more details. But thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you very much, Pete. Thank you very much for having me on, first and foremost. Really appreciate extending the invite for me to come and present today. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is just do a bit of a technical overview of the Power Platform and talk about, what's driving low-code momentum across organizations. So my name's Nathan Backers, and I look after our low-code platform here at Microsoft called the Power Platform for our Australian customers. And a little bit about my journey or my story is that I've been at Microsoft now for about 18 months. Let me know if you can see my screen. All good. All good. So I've been at Microsoft now for about 18 months, but prior to that, I worked at Telstra for 11 years. I was actually a field services technician when I started at Telstra. So I come from a completely non-software engineering, non-software development background. Started using the Power Platform around 5 odd years ago. Started developing a few applications the field technicians in Telstra. That kind of accelerated and grew to the point where I actually moved into a business analyst role for about 6 to 12 months. So I do have a bit of experience from a BA perspective as well, and eventually ended up leading their low-code practice or power platform practice at Telstra called the Power Factory as well. So, really helping that organization sort of set up some of the governance and delivery frameworks that they still use today. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is firstly, why low-code is important. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the Power Platform, talk about all the cool stuff that's, everybody's talking about at the moment with OpenAI and ChatGPT and how that's actually infused throughout our product. What are some of the patterns of demand that are driving, Power Platform usage in organizations? What are some of those benefits from a business analyst or from a business maker perspective? And I'll finish it off with this concept of what we call fusion development. So this is essentially a team where we grab people from different parts of organizations to build, I guess, a V team or a hypothetical team, I guess you could call it, to be able to build out a solution. So I'll start by talking a little bit about, what is driving this demand. So Gartner has done a study that's indicated that in the next 5 years, around 500 million new apps will be created. And that's more than the last 40 years combined. And off the back of that study, Gartner's also indicated that there's around 5 times faster demand than what your traditional IT departments can deliver using pro-code tooling. So what this is essentially what we call the app gap, and that is the gap between supply of professional developers and demand of applications. And inside your typical organization, which I'm sure you've seen in real life as well, is that there's around 1,000 transformation scenarios that are identified but go untouched due to that lack of professional developer resources. So typically the professional developers will focus on the upper echelon of the higher impacting issues, while there's a long backlog or a long tail of opportunities which go untouched due to the fact that there isn't the people there to build them. So rather than turning everybody into a pro-code developer, why don't we turn everybody into a developer with low code? And that is essentially what is driving this momentum. And the momentum is already profound throughout enterprise. So they indicate around 70% of all applications developed in enterprises will be on low code technologies by 2025. And that's up from 20% in 2020. So it's the momentum around low code is already there. It's accelerating. ChatGPT and OpenAI is only accelerating that further as well. So it's a very exciting time to be involved in low code. And what benefit does low code play for organizations that have a number of different persona types that are working on different projects? So all the way from business makers or business analysts to IT professionals, all the way through to professional developers. So the advantage of low code is it expands across all these different tool types, skill types, to be able to provide a singular platform with a single pane of glass that people can collaborate and build on and build out these user cases and work together as a team. So it really helps change the culture within inside organizations, having people work closer together, bringing the business and IT closer together. People that typically have skills in Excel, as Andre mentioned earlier, business analysts spend a lot of time in Excel or SharePoint or Access. These skills are transferable across into Power Platform or low code. While on the other end of the spectrum with your professional developers, JavaScript and things like that, they can be converted into low code technologies as well. Those skill types can be utilized in low code technologies as well. So if I just have a bit of a deeper look into the Power Platform, so Pete kind of covered this off a little bit earlier, but just to give a bit of a summary of the 5 key products that make up the Power Platform. We have Power Apps, which is our low-code application development platform. So very drag and drop style experience. If you can build a PowerPoint, you're halfway there to building a Power App. We also have Power Virtual Agents. So this is our low-code chatbot solution or virtual assistant solution, which we can embed or infuse throughout public-facing websites or internal processes. We have Power Pages, which is our business website solution. So if you're registered for a vaccine in Victoria or Queensland, you've probably used a Power Page without knowing it. The vaccine management programs for those states will run through a Power Page, formerly what was known as a Power Apps portal. We also have Power BI, which is our reporting and analytics solution. And we also have Power Automate, which is our kind of like the unsung hero of the Power Platform. It ties a lot of these systems together. It's the automation tool. We can do digital process automation or API first automation, as well as RPA automation through Power Automate for desktop as well. Around these 5 key products, which make up the Power Platform, we have 1,000 data connectors. So a data connector is essentially an out-of-that-box API into various systems that would commonly be used in enterprise, Salesforce, SAP, ServiceNow, so on and so forth. That's so you can quickly integrate with these systems without having to start from scratch. We have what we call AI Builder. So that is essentially a low-code development platform to be able to build AI models, or you can train AI models, which Microsoft provides particularly for your user case. We have Dataverse, which is our relational database, which underpins a lot of this technology. So we can build our own data sets within Dataverse and create what we call a common data model, which we can reuse throughout all of these processes. So as you mentioned, as Pete mentioned earlier, a big issue is around data cleanliness. We can help alleviate that through systems like Microsoft Dataverse and the common data model, so we can reuse those data sets and put some guardrails around what people can do when it comes to data. And finally, PowerFX. So this is our declarative language that we use across the platform to be able to configure. So very much like Excel formulas is how we configure on the Power Platform. So what makes us different to some of the other low-code vendors that are out there? There's plenty of low-code vendors out there, but the way that Microsoft looks at the Power Platform or low-code is how can we actually bring the sum of all of these tools together to drive departmental change rather than user case by user case change. So this is a tool to drive end-to-end transformation. It's a transformation tool in our eyes. We don't see it as just specifically an application development platform, just specifically an automation platform, just specifically a virtual agent platform. It is how can we bring all of these tools together to look at a process end-to-end. So for instance, you might have an end user experience through a Power App, or an external facing experience through a Power virtual agent, or even through a Power page. We can manage AI throughout those solutions through our AI Builder, or infuse AI throughout those solutions through our AI Builder, then automate the data that's produced from those applications to integrate into other systems or automate manual tasks. We can get visibility over how all of those tasks are performing and seeing where those bottlenecks are through Power Automate Process Advisor. We can store all of this information in the common data model or Dataverse, and then we can report on it through Power BI. So it's not just single tools for single use. We can bring all of these tools together to look at solutions end to end. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit more about Power Platform and AI. So obviously, a lot of coverage in the media at the moment about AI, particularly with OpenAI and ChatGPT over the last few months. So what are some of the AI-assisted development features that we have in the Power Platform? So I've already mentioned AI Builder. So that is our low-code platform for developing AI models or training some of the out-of-the-box models which Microsoft provides. So here's a list of some of those out-of-the-box models that we provide, which you can train. So that really means that no longer is it a requirement for a professional developer to develop out this capability in Azure Cognitive Services or something like that. This opens it up for anybody, including business analysts or business users, to be able to infuse AI or train AI models and use those throughout their automations or their apps. We also have AI connectors. So if you do happen to have AI models which have been built by professional developers and you just need to consume those, we can do that through our platform through what we call our connector framework, which I mentioned earlier. So we have a number of different connectors into that more pro-code AI side of things, which we can then easily infuse throughout our products. But some of the more recent announcements is around how do we actually integrate some of that OpenAI capability into the platform. So we have what we call the Copilot, and I'll show a few demonstration videos of what the Copilot is, but it's essentially an AI-assisted virtual agent, I guess, that's taking you through a process of how to build an application. So quite literally, anybody can build an app. We also have Power Apps Ideas, which is AI-assisted development, so giving us suggestions on how to build formulas. Power Automate Copilot, which is quite literally asking Power Automate what you want to automate and it converting that into a working automation for you, just as an example. So I won't go too much further into these AI builder models, but this is an example of what that user interface looks like. Very simple to understand. You can click on any of these models from the first page. And if you wanted to get started, I highly encourage to reach out to Pete or Andre from the Increment team or myself to see how to get started. But it's very easy to be able to get started. You click on one of these modules and then it will ask you for some base level information to train your AI model. And once it's trained with the base level of information, you can start infusing those throughout your apps or your processes. Here's an example of some of those AI-enabled connectors throughout what we call a Power Automate flow. So you can see here, it's quite literally a step in a sequential flow, which we can use click configuration to be able to call a particular API, which has been enabled for us in the Azure stack as an example.
Yeah, sorry, Nathan. I just wanted to touch base on a little bit on the previous slide. If you can go back to it, I think this image here perfectly represents why BAs are in the best position to adopt this. It's the way BAs think that's basically shown in the screen. A step, some actions and activities, and then the result, move on to the next step. So it's very familiar to BAs. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's all good. Very relevant point. So the final thing I sort of wanted to show before I show some of or talk a little bit more in depth about the Copilot features is what we call Power Apps Ideas. So Ideas is a GPT-3 infused AI module within Power Apps, which quite literally turns natural language into a usable formula throughout our applications. So for example, if we had a list or a gallery of data within our applications, and I wanted to filter that application based on users that started with the letter N and records that were created in the last 7 days, I could quite literally type that phrase into what we call our ideas pane, and it would convert that into a Power FX formula for you. So this is truly a no-code experience. So we talk about low-code, no-code. This is entirely no-code. You don't need to know any code here to be able to sort of get some of the apps off the ground and running. Some of the more interesting or cooler features that we've announced in recent memory is around OpenAI and Copilots. So I mentioned earlier, Copilot is essentially assistant to take.
Can I ask a question on the previous slide?
Yeah.
So the input to that is email or like how?
No. So this is actually inside the Power App Studio itself. So this is where you would build out an application. This ideas panel on the side is what you can click on to input your natural language. So in this case, the user typed
that's
in.
the what you require. That's your requirement. So you input, you say you want to filter it by whatever name and things like that. But when you do that, are you trying to look the data set behind it so that you can filter? Are you looking at a whole bunch of documents or what are you?
So it depends on where you use that feature. So if you're looking at the ideas panel in the context of, say, a gallery of data, the gallery of data will already be connected to a data set in the background, whether that be through a connection into SQL or a Dataverse table or something like that.
Oh, okay. So it's
What
still a
you're
database table. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a database table. Yeah, correct. Yes. So it's in the context of the actual application itself and what you're actually looking at. It will provide a suggestion as to how to build a code which correlates to what you're actually trying to achieve. So if the requirement from a business analyst perspective is, I have a table of data which is connected to XYZ data source, I need to show the last records from the last 7 days that are of a pending status. You can quite literally type that into the ideas pane, what you want it to do, and it will convert that into what we call a Power FX formula.
Okay.
So if you don't know the Power FX coding language that well, which is very much like Excel-based formulas, it will actually convert that into the formula or give you a suggestion, which is what it's doing down here.
Understand now. Yeah.
So you can either choose to use that, or in some cases there'll be multiple suggestions. You can either choose to use that or just disregard it. It's up to you. It's just
okay. So it's using the code generator aspect of the
correct.
GPT. Yeah. Okay.
So OpenAI features in Power Platform. So Copilot, this is how we can sort of go through these steps and assist in being able to develop applications. I'll just kick across into a bit of a demo. I think that best describes as to how this looks. So imagine that you're a business analyst, or you wanted to build a proof of concept, or you're a business maker. This is an example of how to do that. So this is the homepage of Power Apps.
Yeah.
Up the top in the panel here, you can quite literally type in, I want to build a particular application for XYZ purpose. In this case, it's just a site inspections application. It'll build out that data schema in the background for that app to operate and store its data. Once you're comfortable with that data set, you can start using this Copilot feature on the right-hand side to suggest new columns or suggest new requirements. It will then go ahead and start creating this application for you. So as you can see, it's adding in these components, it's building the application, and what you're left with is a fully responsive application, which has been built within, a couple of minutes. So this is the power of OpenAI features within the Power Platform. We have this Copilot now, which we can build a fully responsive app just by telling this Copilot what we want it to do, and it will convert that into a working application within a couple of minutes. And you can use that as your baseline or your MVP, or build and extend on that further. It's up to you.
Can you do wireframe with that?
Sorry?
Can you do wireframe with that? Wireframe.
So I do have a little component on that a bit later.
Okay.
But we do have some AI features to be able to convert an image of whatever into an application. So if you quite literally draw out on a piece of paper, what you want your application to look like, take a photo of it, we have an AI model that can actually convert that image into an application for you. So if you wanted to do it that way, you could do that way as well.
Sorry, just one thing, Nathan. I think, Susan, the really powerful thing about this is the time it takes you to build a wireframe, and I've built them, to just show them to end users is probably bigger than the time it takes you to build a functioning prototype of that application using Power Platform. So instead of building wireframes, I'd actually go and build Power Apps that work to show them to the user.
Oh, okay. Actual build the app itself and then let them play with it. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. I think Pete, that's a very good point. So yeah, like when I managed the team at Telstra, when we were delivering or building these applications on behalf of the business, we didn't have a need to build out wireframes. It was quicker for us to build out the MVP directly in Power Apps. It would be obviously helpful if we had some indication from the business, as to what they wanted the app to look like, which would give us a head start. But building out an MVP or building out a mock-up, we didn't need a UI UX designer because we had reusable components that we reused across the organization, and it really cut down on that development time.
Wow. Okay. Yes.
So the next feature is more, we can actually embed that same sort of capability to query ChatGPT or OpenAI, Azure service within applications. So this is an example from an end user sort of perspective, querying data which we've included as a part of our chatbot model. So people are asking questions of that, and it's actually returning answers in the context of internal documentation or public-facing websites via the OpenAI service as well. So if you had a website, you could quite literally type that into the OpenAI model, Power Virtual Agents component, and that means that if somebody asks you a question about that particular process, it will give you information in the context of that website or internal documentation if you configure it that way as well. I won't spend heaps of time on this, but essentially the same thing exists for Power Virtual Agent. For Power Automate that I just showed you in Power Apps. So the ability to be able to integrate that AI Builder service with GPT from the Azure OpenAI service into RPA automation as well. So you can see here that we're classifying some text. So if you have some, let's just say, invoices that are coming in from multiple people, and you wanted to provide a summary or something off to somebody else as a background process, you could do that by integrating that GPT model directly into your automations as well. So this is, as I showed earlier in that AI Builder interface, it's just another module that's available, and you can quite simply and easily configure these or use one of the templates to be able to integrate that OpenAI service throughout your applications or throughout any of the Power Platform. And this is also what I was talking about as well when it comes to creating a chatbot. You can boost your conversations with GPT, so you can quite literally connect it into a public-facing website. Or if you sign up to a limited preview at this stage, you can also connect it into your internal documentation. And when people ask questions of this chatbot, it will actually give answers in the context of that website or that internal documentation. So that's just some of the features from an AI perspective. But now what I wanted to sort of shift gears and have a look at is what is actually driving these patterns of demand for Power Platform inside organizations. So, people always sort of ask the question, do you see Power Platform or low code as a long-term sustainable platform? And the answer is yes. And this on a page kind of summarizes why. These are some of the patterns of demand that exist in organizations now, and we foresee that they will continue to exist in organizations in the X amount of years. So where we see the Power Platform playing a critical role is most organizations will have a long, lengthy tail or a lengthy backlog of applications. A lot of those applications might be professionally developed applications. A lot of these applications or user cases might need to be embedded throughout, existing systems. But there's a lot of those that go unmet, or the cost and effort to be able to migrate those might be too great to move that to a pro code solution. So that's really where the Power Platform can help organizations by easily in doing this in a cost-effective way, where they can move applications to cloud quite simply and quickly and easily, where they previously would cost too much to be able to do that. Another key area is an agility layer around some core ERP systems. So if you take SAP for an example, SAP, a lot of customers have SAP. Obviously, from a Microsoft perspective, customers are heavily invested in those products. We don't expect them to, pull out SAP and replace it with Microsoft's products. So it's how do we actually infuse our applications or build applications around SAP or some of these other core systems to be able to complement them or give end users a different experience or a customized experience. And that is not just for ERP systems like SAP. It might be a core system, it might be a legacy system. That's just a few examples. But these systems that, typically remain throughout enterprises, but you're building an agility layer quickly and simply around that to keep maintaining that source of truth. Collaborative apps. So how do we actually build applications that's infused throughout products like Teams, if our organization used Microsoft Teams? But how can we build these applications to meet our users where they work, whether it be in Excel, whether it be in Outlook, whether it be in Teams, just as an example. Last mile of innovation of Azure. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is essentially how can we connect some of that complex processes that are being built by our professional developers with a simple end user interface. So we can build out that interface in Power Apps, as an example, connect into some of these, really complex processes that we have built out in Azure, and do that through our connector framework and do that quite quickly and simply so people can actually interact with that complexity, but do it in a simple way. Departmental empowerment, I think this is probably the most important one from a business analyst perspective, is how do we actually empower the business users or the business makers to be able to solve their own problems? And lastly, hyper automation. So this is more aligned to our Power Automate product, but how can we automate manual tasks essentially? So this is based off a study which has been done by Forrester on the total economic impact of Power Apps. And this is just benchmarking in regards to what are some of the facts and figures around organizations that were a part of this case study and what is the benefit that they're being returned as a result of using the Power Platform. So around a 74% reduction in app development costs as a result of using the Power Platform, a 502% return on investment over 3 years as a result of using the Power Platform, 24% in reduction in pro code or development costs as a result, 33% reduced time to market, just to name a few. But here is some high-level stats, I guess, about some of that benefit that we've seen from our customers based on that case study. So just to sort of talk a little bit more about the benefits from a business analyst perspective, and I know Pete covered this off quite well at the start, so I don't want to, I guess, duplicate what he's already mentioned. But I think probably the key point is that this is a very low barrier to entry. So working in a business analyst role previously, in a lot of cases, it's a lot of documentation around what are the business requirements, doing mock-ups in some cases. The platform like the Power Platform gives you the ability to actually build some of this stuff out, which can be reused. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't necessarily need to be thrown away. To build out some of this capability and, help actually build out that process from end to end if you wish, or if you have the time and capacity to do so. Some of these user cases, where you'd be documenting that to send onto a professional development team, you can actually do that yourself if you have the time and space to do so. So I think that's a really interesting point. That's actually, how I transformed my own career, was having a lot of that field technician experience, working at Telstra as a field technician, working as a business analyst. A lot of the requirements that I was actually seeing is stuff that I used to face on a day-to-day basis as a field technician. So it was easy for me to be able to interpret the requirements and just build out what I knew technicians wanted, rather than that communication breakdown between, professional developers who necessarily hadn't worked in that line of business before, and, somebody that was pushing those requirements to them. So I think that gives, a great experience to the end users if you can sort of empathize with what they've done on a day-to-day basis. Faster solution development and reduced development costs. I won't spend too much time on that, but essentially it means that you can build out some of these MVPs in a couple of days, couple of weeks. If it doesn't work out, just throw it out, start again. You haven't lost that much time, you haven't lost that much effort in a lot of cases. So it's really about failing fast. It's not like your traditional IT projects where, you might need to get 6 months to an MVP stage, and then if it doesn't go the way that you want it, then it's a big, cost issue. But with Power Platform, you can quite easily stand stuff up, and because of that, reduced development costs and faster solution development, it's quite easily to change. And as much as it's particularly coming from a professional, from a developer standpoint, scope creep and things like that is probably something that makes me shudder a little bit. But it's a lot easier to be able to be flexible when it comes around to things like scope creep with a low-code platform, because it's quite easy to change things and deploy changes. So while we don't encourage that, if it does get to that stage with scope creep, it's a lot easier to manage. Improved collaboration. So it's a singular platform. Everybody's using the same framework. Everybody's using the same tool set. It's all governed and managed in a singular way. So we can, connect business analysts, we can connect citizen developers, we can connect professional developers, all on the same platform, all using the same tools. What they might use it for might be different, but essentially it's the ability to collaborate in platform is there, and it's obviously a big plus. And also, I kind of already touched on this, but typically business analysts will have a better understanding of how the business operates, where there is opportunity to automate or digitize, what that end user experience needs to look like. Sometimes that gets lost in translation between, pushing that onto a professional developer team. With low code, this gives the opportunity for business analysts to be able to sort of, take the bull by the horns, to use that phrase, and build some of this capability out themselves. And also improve data governance. So this is more, a governance thing, but we can use common data models to reuse data sets, so we're not duplicating data. We can tie into organizations' existing data strategies, so we're not sort of building our own user-defined data sets without governance associated to them. So we have a comprehensive governance framework as well associated to this. So given that we're almost on time and I want to leave a bit of time for questions, I'll just finish off with just talking about fusion teams. So fusion teams, this is, I've already mentioned it a few times, but this is the concept of teams from IT professionals to professional developers to business analysts and makers, all working together in a V team or a singular team, whether they're working in the line of business of business, or whether they work in IT, or whether they work in the innovation team. Wherever they work, we can build this V team to look at problems holistically. And some of the roles within creating a fusion development team, typically this is a CIO-led initiative where they define the strategy and organization that says, look, we see the benefit of bringing all these teams and what it's going to mean for us in regards to our culture, and also having another tool in our belt when it comes to development and looking at that long tail of backlog. So they really set the vision and the goal around where low code plays in an organization. And then everybody has a role, but in particular, the business user and maker can identify those business requirements and collaborate with all the people above without necessarily having those, walls or difficulty in being able to collaborate that sometimes might exist in a more waterfall approach. So I just wanted to finish off just by talking about the collaboration thing, because I don't think I'm going to have time to get through all the slides, but this is an example of what I was mentioning before. So collaboration, as an example, you can quite literally take a photo of a form, in this case, this make a reservation form, and we can turn that into an application within a couple of clicks. So if you have an example of how you want an application to look, and it might be a screenshot from a website, it might be an Excel sheet, it might be a Paint document, for instance, it doesn't matter. As long as it sort of meets the minimum criteria, then we can convert that into an application, which you can then build on, or you can even hand this off to another developer if you're not going to be the person doing the development work, to be able to sort of build and extend on that. So this is how our collaboration can work. So you can build this solution or build the baseline quite literally by taking a photo and building an application. And then if you have a developer that's going to take that over from you, they can quite simply log into this application if you've given them access and continue development. So that is an example of how you can collaborate on prototypes. And I won't go through the rest of the slides because we won't have time. But I know there's been a lot of information that we've gone through. This is kind of an example of how it would all come together in practice and the roles that individuals might play. But I won't go into that. And I thank you very much for having me today. And I might hand it back to the moderator to go over some questions if we haven't.
Thanks, Nathan. This was really very informative and very overwhelming as a BA. I felt it will empower me for doing a lot of solutioning or business resolution for the business problems. I will go through some chat messages, some of the questions which users have asked. The first question, Veronica is asking, isn't this another form of an shadow IT which companies are trying to get away from? Veronica, I think after we discuss, looks like it's more about future solutionings and new technologies. Do you want to share some more thoughts on this?
I just wonder, I think that have to be a buy-in from ICT to go into that. You'd have to have the tools in the first place and a minimum of training. Sounds like you don't need a lot, but there'd also have to be buy-in, because you'll see in the other questions that come after that, everything around governance, around how do you build something, and then, what if the person who built it leaves the company, who takes over this thing, and that's the whole thing about I guess there's got to be governance around the whole thing.
Yeah. So thanks, Nick. I think that's the right question.
Nathan, you can take it, or you want me to respond?
No, I can take it. So I guess we do have a comprehensive governance framework, which I haven't really touched on today, but when it comes to app sprawl, shadow IT, they're all common questions or common concerns that we get from organizations, and the way that we mitigate that through the Power Platform is through effective governance. So we can essentially create what we call environments, which is the containers or the safe zones with guardrails where citizen developers might be able to play, but professional developers might have a completely different set of capability because they're trained up, they know what they're doing, they know the risks around data and so on and so forth. So we can actually create safe zones or places with guardrails with effective governance for people to be able to use these tools. I mentioned a lot about citizen development and business makers. We wouldn't necessarily advise to have an environment where people can go and start connecting into, PII data, for instance. Typically, it would be restricted to Office 365 applications or personal productivity scenarios. For some more of those enterprise-wide scenarios, it might be reserved for some of your professional developers. And I guess what we commonly see throughout organizations when it comes to shadow IT is, we talk about low code, is they say, why don't we just shut it down altogether? And the issue with that is that, particularly from a business maker's perspective, there's obviously a need there for digitization if they're looking to build these solutions. And if they don't have a solution like Power Platform, they're probably going to go and build this out on Excel with a macro connected into something. And what that means is there's absolutely no visibility from an IT governance perspective of what that's connecting to, who's using that, with the Power Platform, you have that visibility, you have that governance, you can see what it's connecting to, you can mitigate that risk through effective governance. And that's why we encourage, large organizations, and we commonly have these conversations with IT departments around the risks around this, to have that effective governance to mitigate those risks. And the benefit is you can now have that bird's eye view over processes or user developed applications, which you no longer had before.
Absolutely.
So I think, yeah.
Absolutely, and I agree. And I think, look, there's a level of granularity that you get through which you can allow people to do or not do certain things that I don't think is matched by any other platform out there. You can really specify to a certain level what people with what skills can do what on this platform. And to Nathan's point, you get full visibility of what's going on. So if I was IT, the CIO, I'd rather adopt this, put in the guardrails, and have people continue using macros in Excel.
Just to add to that, what we've seen most organizations do is they stand up a governance structure called a Center of Excellence as part of their Power Platform. And that's usually a 2 to 3 week piece of work that we do just to get them going. And to Nathan's point, they lock it down quite tightly to start with, and then they broaden that out as they get a level of comfort as to how wide and how far they want to go with giving people access. So governance and controls is actually embedded, as is DLP and all of those good things. So it's actually baked into the system. So, it's not the old Access database Lotus Notes problem that we've seen in the past. This is a lot more controlled, and having worked with some of the larger organizations in Australia, it's a bit of a journey to get there. But now that they've moved right past that, so between us and Nathan, we can rabbit off a whole lot of companies that are well past that stage and delivering and developing apps.
Can you name a few of those companies?
Is that okay, Nathan? Do you want to name a few, or do you want me to? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I can talk about the ones that we've had on our Power Hour session. So we had Westpac, quite extensive users of the Power Platform as an example. So that's a heavily regulated industry, obviously, yes. Banking. So they're a fantastic example of somebody that's using the Power Platform to its fullest extent. Obviously, Telstra, where I've come from, there's plenty of public customer stories that you can sort of hear about the journey that I've been on as well, around governance and setting up a center of excellence there called the Power Factory.
Apologies, Nathan. I think just looking at the time, probably we'll go one more question.
Yeah, no worries.
From the Zoe, about once we have developed the MVP model and it's already in use, any incremental features, how that will be incorporated without breaking the existing app, or over a period of time when you have any change in the app, how it maintain with the previous functionality.
Sorry, I sort of missed the first part of that, but it was as apps are updated, how do you sort of manage source control and things like that?
Yeah,
additional functionality or the features on this existing app. Yep.
Yeah, right. So if you wanted to, with the Power Platform, you can connect it into a Git repository to be able to manage version control and source control. We also have support for Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions if you wanted to have an automated CI/CD pipeline or something like that. So you can have these applications developed and ALM managed in the same way that your existing applications are managed as well. Well, there's also an in-product feature called Pipelines, which is a couple of months old. That's an embedded in-product ALM experience where quite literally click to deploy through applications from one environment to another. It will check things like dependencies and so on and so forth, or any app errors or any potential accessibility errors even, and it will give you that feedback before it actually deploys it from one environment to the other. So yeah, there's a number of different ways. It pretty much integrates throughout all pro code tools, I guess, that users or developers would use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think there's another part that makes me feel comfortable when I started off, and that's within the app itself. When you develop an application, it's versioned natively. So when I go and try to develop a new feature, in order for that feature to get released to the end users, I have to publish it. And if I do not publish it, It's simply like saving a Microsoft document. I don't know how to put it. If I don't publish it, no one will see it. And if I do publish it and there's an error within the app itself, I can go like you go on SharePoint and look at version control for documents and restore a previous version. So to start off with, you know, I think ideally what Nathan said should be the ultimate goal. But if you're playing around and you're afraid you might break something, there are mechanisms that will allow you to roll back to any previous version a lot more easily.
Can I ask a final question? Is actually what's your typical turnaround, like from idea to an app? What's the time frame?
To build an MVP, I'd probably say average time frame 2 weeks, if that. You know, I guess my job at the moment is to kind of build out a lot of demonstrations for organizations that are looking to adopt the Power Platform, and you know, I probably wouldn't spend longer than 2 weeks on most. Some take a couple of days, some might take a day if I've already built out those components for other applications. So if you build out these components, you can publish components, so you can reuse them again for other applications quite quickly and simply. So organizations, as Andre had mentioned, who've reached that level of maturity, you know, typically have these component libraries where they can build an application in a couple of hours because they just pull these different parts together or copy and paste them into a single app. So
absolutely, that's actually probably one of my biggest call out and realization when I actually experienced it when I was in Westpac, and using Power App, and it really astounded me because the speed, the same functionality, a set of functionality, you are talking about days, and then you from like the workshop time is longer than the delivery time.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of power apps that might take 6 months to build. It's a user case by user case basis, but you know, obviously there's some scenario. Most of the scenarios to get to a really quick MVP only takes a short period of time.
Yeah.
Then one last question from my side was more about would you like to throw some light on the learning or the certification part about if anyone wants to get more experience on the Power Apps?
Yeah, we have, I think Pete posted this earlier, but we have the Microsoft Learn page. I'll post a link to that. There's essentially learning paths in there which build up to eventually get to a certification stage. They're quite good. So I'd start there, but there's also plenty of YouTube content out there, plenty of, I'm not sure what the word is, influencers, creators that are making YouTube content about Power Platform. So highly encouraged to check out people like Shane Young is a good example. Reza Durrani, as an example. I'll post some of their names in the chat, but that's essentially how I learned, was the YouTube videos. So yeah.
I'll confirm with that. We talked about whether we should mention YouTube video when I did the resources, and I said, "Oh, probably let's see how things go." Look, I think documentation is really good. Give it a go, and then when you hit up on just do the normal thing, have a look at how others have solved it. It's probably you're not the first person that's facing that challenge. And remember, there's more than one way to get to the goal. For me personally, my certifications have always come after I've done the actual work. So I think that works better for me. I can't study and then take an exam and then learn. I actually do the work, experience the challenges, and then I go and get the certification.
Right. Okay. I think thanks everyone. Thanks Pete and Nathan and Andre for your valuable information. We are just sort of 5 minutes away from our time. Is there anything, Bree, Susan, you want to share?
Yes, I also would like to say very big thank you. And I would like to encourage everyone on the call. Obviously, this was very interactive and very topical conversation. We will send out a survey. Give us indication what basically tickles your fantasy and how do you want us to carry on this conversation in the next couple of months. Is there an appetite to set up a follow-up session? Because we literally couldn't answer all of these questions. Or do you feel that we should do a hands-on workshop? Just help us to curate the content that will help you. And again, fantastic big thank you, Pete, Nathan, Andre. And of course, the Sydney team. Don't forget, call for volunteers. This all happens with the volunteers who do the operation work in the background. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That wraps up our
Thank
today's
you,
session.
everyone. Take
Have a
care.
nice
Have a
day.
good
Bye.
Thank you.